Jesus had made the challenge, "Take heed that the light which is in you is not darkness." And Luke has linked that to us with a challenge Jesus brought to the Pharisees, which caused great conflict between Jesus and the Pharisees as they sought to justify themselves, and Jesus sought to highlight their inconsistency. He stimulated the discussion by not performing the ritual washing procedure before he sat down to dinner at a Pharisee's house. One of the first things that you taught the children in a Jewish home was how to ceremonially wash their hands. When I visited a Jewish home in Israel a few years ago, the first thing you noticed was that they had the two sinks in the kitchen, and there was a procedure involved in washing your hands, not just putting hands under the tap and washing them or even getting the soap and scrubbing them, but there was a ritual way of doing it. And Jesus didn't perform that ritual. And the Pharisee marveled. How come Jesus doesn't do such a basic thing? And Jesus takes the opportunity then of challenging him, saying, "You Pharisees make the outside of the cup and dish clean, but your inward part is full of greed and wickedness. Foolish ones, did not he who made the outside make the inside also? But rather give alms of such things as you have, then indeed all things are clean to you. But woe to you, Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and all manner of herbs, and pass by justice and the love of God. These you ought to have done, without leaving the others undone. Woe to you, Pharisees, for you love the best seats in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplaces. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like graves which are not seen, and the men who walk over them are not aware of them." Jesus was saying, you concentrate on the outward appearance. You want to be respected of people. You want them to acknowledge that you are the holy ones. You are the righteous ones. You are the ones who are careful to do what the law says. You know the law. You're experts at it, and you know what God requires of you, and you do it. You are clean. But Jesus says you're only clean on the outside. You're not clean on the inside. You don't pursue justice. You don't pursue the love of God. You might give a tenth of your possessions, but you keep the rest of it yourselves. You have no mercy on the poor. You don't give alms. If you had a greater focus on giving to those who had a need, then indeed you would be righteous. For the very fact that they were Pharisees meant that they were highly educated, and to be highly educated means you need to have significant resources, that you have been able to spend the time studying and not just working. And so the Pharisees were the wealthy people. They had others who did the work, but they saw themselves as elite and privileged. And of course, Jesus sees the heart and sees that it is grubbing after money. There is greed. They seek honour, but there is wickedness at the core. Now, this is in Luke chapter 11, verses 37 to 44. And the reading continues in verse 45. One of the lawyers answered and said to him, "Teacher, by saying these things you reproach us also." And he said, "Woe to you also, lawyers, for you load men with burdens hard to bear, and you yourselves do not touch the burdens with one of your fingers. Woe to you, for you build the tombs of the prophets, and your fathers killed them. In fact, you bear witness that you approve the deeds of your fathers, for they indeed killed them, and you build their tombs. Therefore the wisdom of God also said, I will send them prophets and apostles, and some of them they will kill and persecute, that the blood of all the prophets which was shed from the foundation of the world may be required of this generation, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zachariah, who perished between the altar and the temple. Yes, I say to you, it shall be required of this generation. Woe to you, lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge. You did not enter in yourselves, and those who are entering in you hindered." And as he said these things to them, the scribes and the Pharisees began to assail him vehemently, and to cross-examine him about many things, lying in wait for him and seeking to catch him in something he might say, that they might accuse him. My name's Arthur, and I trust the Lord will bless us as we meditate And think about these words that were said to the lawyers. What were the charges against the lawyers? The first one was that they took the law and they said what obligations the law put on people. But they didn't apply the obligations to themselves. They knew the legal loopholes that they could get out of it for themselves. And they never helped people bear the obligation. They just said, this is what the law requires. This is what you must do. Jesus says the character of God is love. The love of God was what he mentioned to the Pharisees. If you're going to tell people the obligations that they have, you must help them meet those obligations, not wash your hands of the burden that your law puts upon them. And you think you honour the prophets by building fancy tombs to them. But in fact, you don't honour the prophets at all, because you never listen to their message. You just build buildings and paint them white, and you are in fact confirming the actions of your fathers. They killed the prophets, and you make it plainly clear that they are dead by building their tombs. You affirm the work of your fathers, rather than repenting from the work of your fathers and heeding the message that God has given to you through the prophets. For this is what God said, I will send them prophets and apostles, and some of them they will kill and persecute. In fact, Stephen went a lot further. He said, which of the prophets did the fathers not persecute? And when we look at the lives of the godly men of the scriptures, we find that all of them were rejected at some stage in their life, at least. Starting with Abel, who was rejected by his brother, not because he'd done anything evil. He was righteous, and his brother was wicked. Therefore, Cain slew Abel. Now, it seems that so often the people who kill God's servants get away with it. Cain, he was not punished, he was exiled, but his life was not taken from him. And the story of bloodshed of God's people went right through. The last one that Jesus mentioned here was the blood of Zechariah, who perished between the altar and the temple. Zechariah is the second last prophet of the Old Testament. And here we're told that he was killed actually in the temple. He was involved in rebuilding the temple after the exile. He encouraged the people to build the temple. But when the temple was rebuilt, evidently he was murdered between the altar and the temple, in the very temple that he had built. As he tried to turn the people's hearts back to God, they had killed him. And there was no retribution that had been brought upon those who did it. Well, Jesus is saying the time has come for retribution on all of these, which was fulfilled 40 years later when the Romans absolutely destroyed Jerusalem. But you lawyers are to blame. You have taken away the key of knowledge. You stop people reading the Bible for themselves and learning from God. You say, no, we must interpret it for you. We must tell you what it means. And this charge can be brought against many Christian leaders who have claimed to themselves the right to interpret Scripture and have taken it away from the people. You do not let the people read the Scriptures that God might speak to their hearts themselves. Each of us is accountable to God, so we must search the Scriptures ourselves that we might know the mind of God. But the lawyers took the Scriptures away from the people. They didn't follow them themselves, and they got in the way of those who were seeking to follow it. Well, the lawyers and the Pharisees and the scribes didn't take kindly to Jesus' criticisms. Jesus was talking about their heart. Their heart was not right with God. And so rather than repenting, they vehemently assail him. They cross-examine him. They come to him and to challenge his thinking and understanding. They're the experts of the law. They're the people who have studied. Jesus doesn't have the right credentials. So they seek to find fault with him, lying in wait, pretending sometimes to be seeking the truth, but really seeking to catch him in something he might say. They needed to discredit him, that they might justify themselves. The response that is appropriate is for us to humble ourselves before the mighty hand of God, to make sure that the light that is in us is not darkness, that the light of Christ might shine in our hearts. that he might transform our thinking.